So next up, we have our panel discussion, Future-Proofing Your Brand with Consumer Insights. And I'm delighted to welcome to the stage Matthew Bloxham, obviously in the middle, Head of TMT Research, EMEA Bloomberg, Selene Riontino, Insights Lead of Butternut Box, my dog's a big fan, and Emma Pinto, Senior Shopper Marketing Manager of the Clorox Company Europe. Okay, so thank you so much for joining our panel today. I think you'll see that in just 3 guests, we have a broad spectrum of organisations. So what I want to start with doing is asking you to introduce your role at your organisation and then perhaps explain how important consumer research is to you and to your organisation. So we're going to start off, I think, with Emma.
Hello. Thanks,
Hello.
Sam. Just checking it worked. So hi, everyone. My name's Emma. So I head up the shopper marketing function at Clorox Europe. So some of you may have heard of Clorox. It is a big, fat US company with brands spanning charcoal for barbecues to Burt's Bees lip balm to Ranch Hidden Valley dressing. In Europe, we have 2 brands. So Burt's Bees, which is hopefully a lot of you have heard. We have those yellow lip balms, loved by many. And we have a cat litter brand called Everclean. So 2 very, very different segments. A lot of my friends who still work in the beauty industry are like, cat litter? I'm like, yeah, it's really interesting, actually. Consumer research insight is really, really important to us at Clorox. We really want to pride ourselves in being consumer obsessed. And that's whether you are the general manager, whether you're working in supply chain. We really want to try and get into the hearts and minds of the consumers. We are fortunate that we have a regional team who run a number of researches and different studies for us. But in Europe, we're actually quite a small team. We're about 50 people in the European office. And within my team, there are actually 2 plus myself, Hardeep's down there, hey Hardeep, that work on the insights function. So we need to be agile when we're trying to figure out a way to get into the mind of the consumer. And one thing that we did a few months ago is our human insights lead for the region actually ran what he called a consumer obsession day. So it was a day where everyone was told to down tools, no matter how busy you are. And everyone within the business, from the general manager again, to the supply chain guys, to us in shopper, the sales team, the marketing team, were tasked with putting themselves in the mind of the consumer. So we were all given that brief to go find a consumer tension. So, do we have dry lips? We've just bought a cat, we need to get some cat litter. And then putting ourselves through that shopper journey. So where do we start looking for that product? And then took ourselves out into the whichever local store was relevant to actually purchase that product. And it was great. It showed us loads of different insights and opportunities just to really understand how our brands show up for the consumer. So yeah, consumer research and insight is really important, and it's something that we try and live and breathe all the time.
Would you recommend consumer obsession days?
Really, really would do. So we used, and I'm sure people in the room have used it as well, the mirror boards. Mm-hmm. So just kind of mapping out, taking photographs. And I think it was just really interesting. We've obviously got a wide range of different age ranges, as most people do in their businesses, how that shopper journey started off in different places. So the younger generation within the office, a lot of them started on socials. People more of my generation started in the traditional sense on Google. But I think it gave us some really tangible insights in terms of how we want to show up and how we can improve that.
Interesting. Selene, do you want to explain your role and the importance of consumer insights to you?
Sure. Hello, everybody. I work at Butternut Box, and we are a scale-up, if you like buzzwords, in fresh dog food. So we started in the UK 7-8 years ago now, and we are expanding gradually in Europe. We are present in 6 markets now. Consumer research, consumer insights, it's core to what we do in a way that is not just cliche. So Butternut Box is a D2C company, which means that customer closeness is just non-negotiable, is fundamental. Without understanding and staying really close to the changing needs and feelings of our customers, there's nowhere to go. It's not a relationship that is intermediated by anybody else. But also, we operate in dog food and in fresh dog food, and it's a category that we've kind of created years ago. So the category is still to establish, to explain, to define. Consumer research is really important to try and understand what's the best language to explain to people what does it even mean, fresh dog food. But the bit I'm most passionate about is that dog food as a product fits into such an emotional, social space, not just functional as is a product, it's just food. So using consumer research to really understand both how much good or not so good we do to the dog and the specific kind of functional promises that something like dog food delivers, but also how do we interact and influence that emotional dimension and that relationship that the pet parent has with their dog is really important. And I think becomes a competitive advantage when you operate in a space like ours. So that's a big part. The other thing is that we are digitally native, as somebody would say. What it means is that we have a big website, we have a big testing culture, we test and iterate on everything. So consumer customer research is also important for that day-to-day, so to speak, tactical decision-making of understanding for any test, anything, why the result of the test of an A/B test is it's gone this way rather than this other way. So enriching with the human understanding data and charts is really important.
I liked how you talked about the social and the emotional dimensions that you take in your research. Do you think they should be equally balanced, or is one more directive for you?
They should be equally balanced. Alongside the functional, there are so many ways to think about it. When it comes to the specific product, of course, if you don't deliver on the kind of functional, so to speak, promises of is it good, is it healthy, does the dog like it, and so on, there's nowhere to go. So kind of like performance type of features. But that emotional and social dimension, they are equally important. Of course, the weight we give to insights about either of these aspects really depends on the decision at hand. But considering that when we do insights and research, we do it for brand and marketing and digital product and commercial and so on, the emotional and social connection for brand and marketing is really almost more important than functional, top of the funnel.
Matthew, a bit different for you.
Yeah, hi everybody. So Matthew Bloxham, I work at Bloomberg. Actually got two roles. The one here, which I head up a group within a unit called Bloomberg Intelligence, which is basically an investment research group. So we provide research in lots of different forms to fund managers. So if you've got a pension fund, which I'm sure pretty much everybody in this room does, they'll be consuming research from people like my group to help them decide where they should be investing your money, hopefully to grow it over time so you can have an amazing kind of retirement. And so that's kind of one part of my role. And so I run the telecom, media and technology research practice at anything like from Vodafone, BT, WPP, all these kind of big media companies in Europe. We cover the research for those. The second job I have is a global role, still for Bloomberg Intelligence, called Data Innovation. So I'm helping all of the research teams, and we're about 500 people globally, understand better ways to use data to generate insights. Some of that is about using things like the Attest platform to kind of pull together consumer insights. Some of it is about using data science and things like Python to get the most out of the data that we're using. And I guess a lot of you probably think that, Bloomberg maybe is just like a kind of news organization, a bit like the FT or the Wall Street Journal. That's very much just the front door to what we do. The main Bloomberg service is a professional service for professional finance, particularly fund managers, which costs over $30,000 a year for a subscription. And we've got something like 330,000 subscribers like that. And I describe the real Bloomberg product is kind of like the Google of the financial world. It's just this enormous environment that covers everything. We were talking about a few weird and wonderful things that you can do on the Bloomberg terminal just before we came on. But, basically, if you're a fund manager, a trader, an investor, you can get news, data, insights, analysis on the terminal. And basically, if you work in that world, you will almost certainly have a Bloomberg terminal on your desk. And so we kind of use consumer insights in two. I'd say we've got customer insights and consumer insights. So Mike Bloomberg, who still very much runs the business day to day since he founded it in 1981, is incredibly passionate about our customers. That might sound a bit cliched, but he really is. And so literally every day, people are out talking to customers, listening to customers, and tweaking the product on a daily basis to adapt to what our customers want and need, how they use particular functions, what they're interested in, the fact that there's something really useful for them, but they didn't know it was there because it's such a vast platform. How do we adjust things so they can use it and get more value out of it, and that they see the value in the quite significant cost this is to their companies? So we also use that customer insight for our brand partners. So obviously we have a lot of people that advertise on our platforms, whether it's TV, radio, or online. And so we have a product called Audience Accelerator, which does a lot of data science on how our customers use the terminal, what they're interested in, what kind of news they're dwelling on, and we use that to basically kind of feed back to brands, mainly B2B brands that advertise on us, so that they're positioning their messaging right for the audiences that you can get through Bloomberg. And then if you look more at the consumer stuff, that's really where it comes into play with my group, Bloomberg Intelligence. We have a lot of consumer sectors, and consumer insights really help us to differentiate our research in a very crowded market where you've got an enormous number of investment banks all looking at the same data, all trying to tease something out of it that's a bit different, so that fund managers pay attention to them rather than one of the competitors, and using consumer insights is something that differentiates us from those competitors.
Just before we go on, can I just say this is, of course, open to all. So if you want to pop a question into Slido, we'll be popping those up on the screen in a moment. What I found quite interesting when you were all talking is that how important it is to your business in very different ways. And I wondered how you thought the importance of consumer research and insight within a business has altered over the past 5, 10 years even.
I think it has really, really evolved. I think, going back even 5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, I think when people talked about, consumer research and insights, it was probably someone locked away in a cupboard somewhere with Excel spreadsheets.
That doesn't happen now.
Sometimes. But yeah, that was kind of the depth that it went, or it would be the expectation that the far bigger companies had the budget to really run the larger scale research projects. But I think now, especially with companies like Attest, you just make it so much more accessible. And I think for every business, like the consumer and the customer has to be at the heart of everything that you do. Otherwise, you're kind of just sat in a room talking to yourselves.
Yeah, to Emma's point about accessibility, like even just in the past 3 years, a bit more a Butternut, like the way my role and my team's role has changed has been quite stark. The main kind of trend has been to make sure that the people who design the solution or are holding kind of assumptions up in their minds about this is going to work, this is the next biggest opportunities we should go after and so on, are empowered to run robust research. Because in theory, anyone can run research, especially quant research. There is this general idea that running a survey is so easy. But yeah, like training, giving the tools, bringing in the technology that really allows people from any part of the organization, from brand managers all the way to product designers, to run the research themselves, that's been really a trend for us.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of examples, definitely within the finance industry. If you look back 30 years, somebody like me as an analyst, if you were making recommendations about companies or industries, it was largely based on intuition, but that intuition was like, your built-up experience of data, but, kind of just kind of formed into a view, and people just won't accept that anymore. And so now, you've got hedge funds that basically plug in directly to the Bloomberg data. They run these really complicated computer programs that are sucking data real time and spitting out answers that are actually based on, millisecond data about what they should be doing. So I think having kind of data to back up your intuition, and now as an analyst, really that's what's going on. You might have intuition, it could be correct, but your clients will only kind of really believe it if you can support it with data. And I think we see this in the advertising world too. I cover all the big ad agencies, and again, massive change over the last 30 years. Advertising was based on intuition. You went in, they gave you some creative, that's what you run with, and clearly today, every single creative campaign is led by data and insights to justify what you're doing.
When you say that things have changed over the last sort of 5 or 10 years, I know, Matt, we were talking before you came on about how we all perceive that Bloomberg is very much a legacy brand. And I was actually really surprised that it only started in 1981. In my head, it was, people on old-fashioned typewriters in 1953. And I just wanted you to share with the audience, because I found it fascinating, how that's almost like a deliberate ploy.
Yeah, it is. So Mike Bloomberg used to work, I think it was Salomon Smith Barney, and he got sacked. And he already had this idea about creating this kind of terminal which would feed pricing data to investment customers. And at the time, this was just like completely innovative. And back in the early 1980s, computers were enormous. And so it really was, people, it's crazy. He used his kind of redundancy money to go and start Bloomberg with a couple of colleagues, and I think his first customer was Merrill Lynch. He sold them a few terminals, and the rest is history. And back then, it was very much this kind of command prompt. I don't know, a lot of people may not even know what that looks like. But if you go into a DOS prompt, if your computer crashes and you see this stuff, that's kind of what the Bloomberg terminal used to look like. And actually, to a large degree, it still does. And that is intentional, because we've got all these customers who know what the Bloomberg terminal looks like and how it works. And if we were to suddenly change to some amazing, fancy, kind of web-based environment, suddenly all these traders and hedge fund managers would be completely bamboozled and not know how to find everything that they need to find within milliseconds. So we do evolve the product on a daily basis, but it's incredibly gradual, so that it's still got that familiarity. And a lot of people really value it. It's basically a black screen with orange text. That is basically what the Bloomberg terminal looks like. And there is some charting and stuff around it now, but really it's black and orange, and that is the kind of Bloomberg branding. Always has been, I think always will be.
Oh, it's worked. As I say, I was very surprised to learn it was 1981, which doesn't seem that long ago to me. We often think about how our consumers in our research can tell us about how they feel now, in the here and now. So how do you use research to help you prepare for the future?
Is that for me again? Okay. I'm going to kind of combine it with one of the other questions we had. So within Bloomberg Intelligence, how do we use Attest? We basically use it to help us understand better consumer sectors. So we run quite a few global surveys. One example I'll give is the autos market. So we run a global auto, so one in Europe, actually China and the US, and we look at purchase intentions for brand new cars. And we've been really focused on the transition to EVs, and also what that means for kind of brand switching. So if somebody is looking to buy an EV, are they going to go from, say, having a Ford to a Tesla? Or if they're a BMW customer, are they sticking with BMW for the next brand? So we're kind of getting really direct insights about whether these big listed companies have got a positive or negative trend in their share and their revenue. What we find when we do these surveys is that actually there are surprising insights. So for example, with the auto survey, we first launched this in Europe kind of last year when, there still is a huge amount of hype around the transition to EVs, and it was really at peak then. We found in the first audience research we ran with Attest that it was quite an underwhelming appetite amongst European customers to shift to EVs. And we kind of looked at the data, and we're still at a relatively early stage of our kind of partnership with Attest, and this is the first time we've done a kind of consumer autos survey, and this seemed really at odds with everything you were seeing in the press about the appetite for EVs. turned out to be spot on, and our autos team got a lot of credibility both with our investment customers, but also the autos brands and the management teams there about having this kind of leading insight. And you're seeing now that kind of people like Tesla are struggling to sell cars, and BMW's been soft on EV sales. People are taking a much more kind of tempered transition towards or kind of away from a petrol or diesel car. And so what we find with all of our surveys is we get insights that we weren't expecting to see, and that drives our future research. So it may have been that our autos team were thinking we're going to do a huge amount of stuff on this particular part of the autos market. We do the consumer research with Attest. It comes up with something interesting and surprising, and that helps them to shift to a different area that's new and innovative and actually adds value to our investment clients.
Emma, what about in your world, which is quite a diverse world, I think?
It is, yeah. I think, one of the key ways that we use it is to identify what we call a consumer tension. So thinking of one of our recent launches, obviously with the growing trend in the market and people's, people are making choices because they're wanting to buy more sustainable products. Actually, that can come into the world of cat litter as well. People are wanting to make sure that litter itself is sustainable from a sustainable source. But of course, with litter, it's really got to work. Like, you don't want to be making that choice for something that's natural that actually then, we were chatting earlier, people come into your home and go, oh, Milo lives here. We can smell that he's at home. So, that helped us identify what we would call a consumer tension. And then it's really up to, our brands to then, answer that consumer tension in a way that's going to deliver growth, both for the category and then also for the brand. So as a result of identifying that particular tension, we have launched a naturally product within our portfolio.
I really like the idea of thinking about customer tensions. Unfortunately, I shared with Selene some of my customer tension about her product early. 99% thrilled, by the way. What about you? How do you work out the future
That was
for you?
useful. I was thinking, so we have large quant studies in place, large surveys in place that allow us to spot the rate at which something that 1 year or every 6 months, it depends, may look like niche, and then how quickly that, consumer need, job to be done, whatever, changes over time. So we kind of have some sort of like early signal system in place. But while listening to what both of you were saying, I think a lot, first of all, starts from keeping really a close dialogue with people that, for example, operate in the social media marketing team, in the direct sales team, people that meet the customers. So it all starts from kind of having eyes and ears on the ground to just look at how the wider cultural landscape is changing, and to the point that somebody was making the questions, some are just social fads and some others are actual trends that start picking up. So from a qualitative perspective, we start from there. We start from having conversations saying, well, we've noticed that trend, wonder what that is. And then every year I run something that started as a segmentation study and now is a year pulse on market trends. And what that allows us to do, like one of the key elements of that survey, if you like, which by the way we run in all our markets, is kind of a bar chart, nitty-gritty, that looks at the primary need, the kind of primary driver to choose dog food in the population. And when you start tracking those things and comparing them over time, last year, we started noticing that a specific job to be done that used to be very niche, started becoming larger and larger and emerging in more markets. Kind of that gave us the prompt to do more investigative research type of thing. So we went on and we started poking at this attitude and running, for example, a conjoint study, a willingness to pay study to be like, is it just a fad? Would people pay more to have this thing compared to our usual standard pricing. And that led to, honestly, a change in our long-term commercial strategy. But a few things have to come together to, I guess, spot future trends and act on them.
So we really can see into the future. Okay, you haven't let me down. There's lots and lots of questions on the Slido. We probably only have time for a couple, but as we've said before, we will collate them and share them with you to reply back at your leisure. So something, as we say, we'd give a nod to AI in this afternoon. Alexei has asked, how are you all thinking or already using AI in your consumer research? Start with Emma.
So Clorox as a business are kind of testing out across all the multiple different platforms that we saw earlier, whether it's from the R&D teams and the sales functions. And then our team specifically here in the UK, we're testing out with Dragonfly AI at the moment. So they're really great for helping you understand, the heat maps, the glance paths, and really that attention grab within the first 2 seconds of, passing a shelf edge or seeing something on social or seeing an out of home. So we're definitely at that stage as a business. I think you guys seem like you're far more advanced than we are, but in that kind of testing and learning stage at the moment. And I think there's definitely a place for it. It's about finding what's going to work best for you and your team as well as the organisation. But certainly, everything that's out there, there will be different tools that can help us really add value. And a lot of the time, hopefully quell a lot of the discussions that go round and round and round and take a lot of everyone's time. So yeah, we're kind of very much in our testing and learning phase, I'd say.
I think that's a tension all researchers feel. Matthew, what about you?
Yeah, so we're not using AI specifically within consumer research, but we are doing a huge amount on AI. I mean, Bloomberg's been using AI for over a decade, and obviously the shift now is towards Gen AI. And I guess in the Gen AI world, we're very much on board with this co-pilot concept. So we already, and have done for a long time, look at our customers as different categories of customers, and we have a very clear view of what their workflow is. And even internally, that's a very clear workflow that I, as a research analyst, have. And so we're developing lots of different AI-powered co-pilots to help improve, enhance those different workflows. And for us as research analysts, a lot of it is about training large language models on all of our research we've published so far so that we can type a few bullets and then it produces something that looks very familiar to what Matthew Bloxham would have written, but also very consistent with the Bloomberg style. We have a massive thick book, which is called The Bloomberg Way, about words we can use, phrases we can use, what we can't use. And so if you've got something that together says, this is very clearly written by Matthew, but also fits the Bloomberg style, you've suddenly kind of automated a lot of angst that goes back and forward between us and the editors. And we will start to ingest our consumer research data together with all the other data we've got into those large language models and other analytical models to help us generate new and different insights and combine things together to get derivative insights from different data sources. So, it sounds amazing. We're still very much at an early stage of that journey, and it's incredible how much human effort goes into training these models, and we're still at that point, but it's moving very, very quickly.
I do wonder if we would all recognise our own way of writing if it was presented artificially to us. Selene, what about you?
Yeah, I definitely resonate with the idea that it's a journey, and these things in many cases sound sexy, but there's a lot of work that still needs to go into supervising and training and so on. And to Emma's point, when a few years ago we were thinking about how to use AI in general, we had to make a decision on the kind of use case or application that made the most sense. And the one that has made sense in terms of investment of time has been more on the customer research front. We have so many sources of voice of the customer, and moderated, unmoderated, solicited, unsolicited, literally coming from all types of interactions that we have with customers. Lately, we've been working really hard to bring all of these sources into one platform that allows us to basically rebuild and re-understand the end-to-end journey of our customers and kind of the drivers at every stage of that life cycle, and fundamentally guide our decision on, okay, what do we need to prioritize, because that's something that really matters for acquisition, for onboarding, for retention. The best thing of, I guess, using AI in that context is that, well, first of all, automates a lot of analysis, which we like, but also on one end, you get lots of like verbatim and what would be qualitative insights, analyzed and quantified. So for the people in the organization that really resonate with charts, they love it. And then you also can use Gen AI to summarize it for people that like more words and text. But you still have in the platform the recording of what the customer said over the phone to the member of the customer love team. And so you can really empathize. And we are saying it like in a like businessy expression, it's kind of empathy at scale. In a way that, and in formats that work for different people. So that has been our best case. I'm looking forward to seeing AI and Gen AI kind of cracking more the emotion, coding, understanding space, because that will add kind of the extra really useful insight to that analysis. But I suspect we're far from there.
Well, as with all good panels, this could go on all afternoon. We've got time for one very quick question, an important burning issue for Selene. How do you do consumer testing with the dogs?
Yeah, I saw that. Well, funny enough, there are ways. There are two ways. One, the bit I do, is more kind of looking at the dog's behaviors and preferences and dislikes through the eyes of the human. And that's fascinating. And that's basically asking very specific and guiding kind of the customer to observe certain things, to notice, to take notice, diary studies and whatnot. But there are also vets and dog nutritionists who focus on just observing the behavior of the dog around food. Does it eat quickly? So speed of eating, tail wagging, going how many times like the dog goes back and forth, goes back to the food, how hungry the dog is a few hours later. So yes, there are methods, and there are. It's a cool
I imagine
profession.
that would be something that you could easily train an AI. I mean, the most recent Google thing that you've all seen, with the camera and everything on a smartphone, you could get AI just to,
100%.
yeah.
100%. Yeah, you will miss the fun of being there.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you get that kind of job? Anyway, thank you so much. You've been a brilliant panel this afternoon.